The asphalt shimmered with late summer heat as Marcus pulled into the crowded parking lot of Oak Ridge Apartments. He circled twice, scanning desperately for an open space. His 12-hour shift at Memorial Hospital had drained him completely, and the thought of parking 3 blocks away made his feet throb in protest. Just as he was about to give up, he spotted it, a visitor's space near Building C. Not his building, technically, but close enough that he could drag himself home without collapsing. Just for tonight, Marcus muttered, pulling his weathered Honda into the spot. I'll move it first thing in the morning. He knew the rules. Residents had assigned spaces, visitors had designated areas, and parking enforcement at Oak Ridge was infamously strict. But it was nearly midnight, his legs felt like lead, and his apartment was just around the corner. Surely no one would notice or care for the few hours until dawn. Marcus locked his car and trudged toward his building, the weight of his hospital scrubs seeming to grow heavier with each step. Behind him, a curtain twitched in a ground-floor apartment of Building C. Had he been less exhausted, he might have noticed the silhouette watching him, might have seen the phone pressed to an ear, might have hurried back to move his car. But fatigue clouded his awareness, and all he could think about was the blessed relief from his bed. At 5:43 a.m., Marcus's phone exploded with sound, jolting him from a deep sleep. Confused and disoriented, he fumbled for the device. Hello? His voice was thick with sleep. Is this Marcus Washington? The voice on the other end was gruff, professional. Yes, that's me. This is Rapid Response Towing. Your vehicle has been reported for unauthorized parking at Oak Ridge Apartments and is currently being impounded. You can retrieve it at our lot on Industrial Drive with proper ID and payment of applicable fees. Marcus bolted upright, sleep evaporating instantly. Wait, what? I'm a resident. I just parked in the wrong section for one night. Sir, we respond to calls from property management. If you have a dispute, you'll need to take it up with them. The tow has already been processed. Panic surged through Marcus's veins as he threw on clothes and rushed outside, but he already knew he was too late. The visitor spot near Building C was empty, his Honda nowhere to be seen. A sick feeling settled in his stomach as he calculated the cost. Towing fees, impound charges, the Uber to the lot, all on his already stretched hospital orderly's salary. The timing couldn't have been worse. Rent was due in 3 days. As he stood there, stunned, the door to the ground-floor apartment swung open. A woman in her 50s emerged, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, designer athleisure wear hugging her slender frame. A small, meticulously groomed dog pranced at her feet. Parking rules exist for a reason, she announced loudly, not looking directly at Marcus but ensuring her voice could carry to where he stood. Some of us appreciate order and proper procedure. Marcus recognized her immediately, Karen Westfield, a self-appointed community watchdog of Oak Ridge. Her complaints at tenant meetings were legendary. Her meticulous documentation of rule violations was the stuff of nervous jokes among residents. And now, clearly, she had set her sights on him. Ms. Westfield, he started, struggling to keep his voice level. I'm a resident in Building A. I worked a double shift yesterday and... Then you should be familiar with the parking regulations, she cut him off, examining her manicured nails. Everyone is assigned spaces. Visitor parking is not for residents too lazy to walk from their proper spots. Marcus felt heat rising to his face. My regular spot was blocked by a maintenance truck yesterday. I just needed somewhere to park for a few hours. Not my problem, Karen replied with a dismissive wave. Perhaps this will teach you to plan better. Rules don't bend just because you're tired. With that, she tugged her dog's leash and continued her morning walk, leaving Marcus standing alone, watching his already difficult day spiral further out of control. As she rounded the corner of the building, her parting words floated back to him. Actions have consequences, young man. Little did Karen know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The next 6 hours were a blur of frustration for Marcus. The towing company's lot was located on the outskirts of town, requiring an expensive rideshare to reach. Upon arrival, he faced a barrage of paperwork and fees that drained his emergency fund, $275 for the tow, $150 for the processing fee, and $75 for the after-hours release despite it being 7:30 in the morning. By the time Marcus reclaimed his Honda and returned to Oak Ridge Apartments, he was both financially wounded and dangerously late for his shift. I can't cover for you again, Washington, his supervisor warned when Marcus called to explain. That's twice this month. One more time and I'll have to write you up. Marcus gripped his steering wheel, knuckles whitening. I understand, sir. I'm on my way now. The day crawled by in a haze of bedpans, vitals checks, and patient transfers. Each time Marcus's mind wandered to his depleted bank account or the smug satisfaction on Karen Westfield's face, he forced himself to refocus on the elderly man who needed help to the bathroom or the young mother recovering from surgery who asked him to adjust her pillows. These people needed him present, not distracted by personal grievances. When his shift finally ended at 8 p.m., dark clouds had gathered over the city, bruising the evening sky. The weather alert on his phone chimed as he walked to his car. Severe thunderstorm warning, possible high winds, residents advised to stay indoors. Perfect, he thought grimly, just perfect. As Marcus drove home through the increasingly heavy rain, his wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour, a voice in his head kept replaying Karen's words. Actions have consequences. The petty vindictiveness of it all still stung. He'd never even spoken to the woman before today, yet she felt entitled to disrupt his life so dramatically over a parking space that would have been empty anyway. He turned into the Oak Ridge parking lot into his assigned space this time, just as a powerful gust of wind rocked his car. The rain was coming down in sheets now, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Marcus made a dash for his building, soaked to the skin before he even locked his car. Inside his small one-bedroom apartment, Marcus peeled off his wet clothes and stood under a hot shower, letting the warmth seep into his chilled bones. The storm outside intensified, thunder cracking so loudly it seemed to shake the building's foundation. Through the bathroom window, he could see tree branches whipping violently in the wind, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the chaotic scene. After his shower, Marcus made a simple dinner of ramen noodles, all he could afford until payday, and tried to distract himself with television. The local news had interrupted regular programming with storm coverage. We're tracking what appears to be a severe microburst developing over the eastern part of the county, the meteorologist was saying, gesturing to a radar map with ominous red and purple blotches. Wind speeds potentially exceeding 60 miles per hour. This is a dangerous situation, folks. Stay away from windows and seek shelter in interior rooms if possible. As if on cue, Marcus's lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, the howling of the wind seemed to grow louder, more menacing. He fumbled for his phone, activating the flashlight function, and made his way to the kitchen drawer where he kept emergency candles. That's when he heard it, a tremendous cracking sound like a gunshot but deeper, followed by a crash that reverberated through the complex. Marcus rushed to his window, pulling back the curtain cautiously. In the strobing light of another lightning flash, he saw it. One of the massive oak trees that gave the complex its name had toppled over, and it had fallen directly onto Building C. Specifically, it had fallen onto the end unit of Building C, Karen Westfield's apartment. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. The enormous trunk had punched through the roof, collapsing a significant portion of the structure. Branches as thick as a man's thigh had shattered windows and splintered through walls. Even through the pounding rain, he could hear shouts and cries of alarm as neighbors began to emerge from their apartments. Marcus's medical training kicked in. Grabbing his raincoat and emergency kit, he sprinted back out into the storm. By the time he reached Building C, other residents had gathered, their shocked faces illuminated by flashlights and phone screens. Someone called 911. A woman was shouting, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Already did, a man replied. They're sending emergency services, but there are trees down all over the city. Might be a while. Marcus pushed his way through the small crowd. I work at Memorial. Is anyone hurt? Has anyone seen Ms. Westfield? Karen Westfield was pinned beneath a fallen wardrobe, conscious but clearly in pain. Her small dog, a Yorkshire Terrier, circled her anxiously, occasionally pawing her arm and whining. When the beam of Marcus's flashlight fell across her face, her eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with suspicion. You, she gasped. What are you doing in my home? Even trapped beneath furniture with rain pouring through her destroyed ceiling, Karen managed to sound indignant. Marcus bit back the first response that came to mind and instead crouched beside her, his trained eyes quickly assessing her condition. The oak tree fell on your building, he explained calmly, shifting into professional mode. I'm here to help. I work at Memorial Hospital. Can you tell me where you're hurt? Karen's lips tightened. My leg, and I think my shoulder. I can't move. Marcus nodded, carefully examining the wardrobe that had her trapped. It was heavy oak, similar to the tree that had caused all this destruction, but it hadn't fallen directly on her. Instead, it had her pinned at an angle against the wall, limiting her movement without causing catastrophic injury. Small mercies. I'm going to try to lift this enough for you to slide out, Marcus told her. But first I need to make sure you don't have any spinal injuries. Can you wiggle your toes? Feel this? He touched her ankle lightly. Karen nodded, wincing. I can feel everything. Too much if you want the truth. Working methodically, Marcus checked her vital signs and assessed for signs of shock or internal bleeding. Finding none, he positioned himself at the wardrobe. When I lift, push with your good leg and try to slide toward me, he instructed. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Marcus strained against the weight of the solid wood furniture, muscles burning with effort. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of exertion, he managed to raise it just enough for Karen to inch herself free. The moment she was clear, he let the wardrobe drop with a heavy thud. Karen lay on the floor, breathing heavily, her designer athleisure wear torn and soaked. The Yorkie immediately rushed to her side, licking her face frantically. "It's okay, Bentley," she murmured to the dog. "Mommy's okay." Outside, the wail of approaching sirens finally cut through the storm's noise. Help was arriving, but likely spread thin across the storm-ravaged city. "Can you stand?" Marcus asked, offering his hand. "We should get you out of here. This building isn't structurally sound anymore." Karen stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before taking it reluctantly. With his support, she managed to stand, putting minimal weight on her injured leg. "Lean on me," Marcus instructed, placing her arm around his shoulders. "And hold on to Bentley with your other arm. We'll go slow." Together, they limped through the devastated apartment, navigating around fallen debris and exposed nails. Karen gasped when they entered what remained of her living room, the full extent of the destruction now visible in the flashlight's beam. "Everything I own," she whispered. "It's all gone." For the first time since Marcus had met her, Karen Westfield's voice held no edge of superiority or judgment, just raw, human vulnerability. The transformation was startling. By the time they made it outside, emergency vehicles were pulling into the parking lot, red and blue lights pulsing against the rain-slicked darkness. Paramedics rushed forward with the stretcher, taking charge of Karen while firefighters began assessing the structural damage to the building. Marcus stepped back, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. He'd been running on adrenaline since hearing the tree fall, but now, as the professionals took over, fatigue hit him like a physical blow. He was about to slip away quietly when Karen's voice stopped him. "Wait," she called from the stretcher where paramedics were stabilizing her leg. "Marcus, wait." Surprised that she remembered his name, he turned back. "You came back for me," she said. It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact, but her tone conveyed confusion. "After what I did to you this morning, why would you do that?" Marcus shrugged, rain dripping from his soaked hair. "It's my job to help people." "Not here it isn't," Karen countered. "Not with me. You could have just not." A paramedic interrupted, informing them they needed to transport Karen to the hospital. As they prepared to load her into the ambulance, she reached out, catching Marcus's wrist with surprising strength. "Thank you," she said simply. Then, with a vulnerable hesitation entirely unlike her previous demeanor, "Would you take Bentley? Just until I'm back. I don't have anyone else to ask." Marcus looked down at the small dog, now shivering in a paramedic's arms. Taking care of Karen's precious pet was the last thing he needed after the day he'd had. Yet another responsibility, another drain on his. 2 weeks after the storm, Marcus found himself in the unfamiliar position of helping Karen Westfield sort through the remains of her apartment. The property management company had finally deemed it safe enough for residents to retrieve salvageable belongings, though the building itself remained condemned. The scene was sobering. Sunlight streamed through the massive hole in the roof, illuminating the devastation in harsh detail. Water damage had compounded the initial destruction, leaving many items beyond saving. Mold already bloomed on the walls, and the smell of damp wood permeated everything. "I never realized how much stuff I had until I saw it all broken," Karen remarked, carefully placing a miraculously intact photo album into a plastic bin. Her leg cast made movement awkward, but she'd insisted on coming personally rather than leaving the task entirely to Marcus. "Most of it's just stuff," she continued, surprising Marcus with her philosophical tone. "Replaceable. But some things." She trailed off, gently touching a cracked picture frame containing a faded photo of a young woman with a striking resemblance to Karen. "Your daughter?" Marcus guessed, pausing from his task of sorting through kitchen items. Karen nodded. "Emily. She's in Seattle now. We haven't spoken in almost 3 years." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken history. Marcus sensed there was much more to that story, but didn't press. Instead, he carefully removed the photograph from its damaged frame. "The picture's still good," he said, handing it to her. "Just needs a new frame." Karen took it with a grateful smile. "Thank you." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds being the occasional scrape of furniture or the soft thud of items being placed in bins marked keep, donate, or trash. Bentley sat perched on what remained of the sofa, watching them with curious eyes. "You know," Marcus said eventually, "I've been wondering something since the night of the storm." "What's that?" Karen asked, struggling to reach a box on a high shelf. Marcus moved to help her. "You remembered my name. When you were on the stretcher, you called me Marcus. But I never told you my name that morning in the parking lot." Karen's cheeks flushed slightly as she accepted the box from him. "I knew who you were before that day. I know most of the residents, at least by name. Part of my self-appointed community watchdog role." She made air quotes around the phrase, mocking her former self. "So you had specifically targeted me?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No," Karen protested, then sighed. "Maybe. I'd seen you before, coming home at odd hours in those hospital scrubs. I knew you worked in healthcare. I think I was envious. Envious? Of what? Karen gestured vaguely. Of purpose. Of being needed. After I retired from teaching high school, I felt superfluous. So I channeled all that energy into enforcing rules and creating structure. It gave me a sense of control. She laughed without humor. Look how well that turned out. Nature has a way of reminding us who's really in control. Marcus considered this revelation as he sealed another box of salvaged items. The Karen before him was so different from his first impression. More vulnerable, more self-aware, more human. The hardness he'd initially perceived seemed to have crumbled along with her apartment walls. I think we all find meaning where we can, he offered. After my mother died last year, I picked up extra shifts at the hospital. Being too busy to think became my coping mechanism. Karen nodded in understanding. That explains why you were so exhausted that night. Double shifts will do that, Marcus confirmed, though I've cut back recently. He didn't add that her parking complaint had nearly cost him his job, forcing him to reevaluate his workload. As the afternoon wore on, they managed to salvage more than either had expected. Photo albums, some clothing that had been in sealed plastic bins, kitchen utensils, books that had been spared the worst of the water damage. Karen's prized collection of porcelain figurines, however, lay in fragments throughout the living room. My mother started this collection, Karen said, carefully picking up pieces of what had once been a delicate ballerina. She gave me one every birthday from when I was 5 until she passed. Marcus watched her face as she tried to maintain composure. I'm sorry about your collection. It's just things, Karen repeated, though her voice wavered. Just things. On impulse, Marcus reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. It's okay to mourn things that held memories. Something in his simple permission broke through her reserve. Karen's shoulders slumped and tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. 6 months later, the first hints of spring touched Oak Ridge Apartments. New leaves budded on the remaining oak trees, carefully pruned after the winter storm that had changed so many lives. Where Building C once stood, construction crews now worked on a new structure, the rhythmic sounds of hammers and machinery filling the air with promise. Marcus parked his Honda, recently upgraded to a slightly newer model thanks to a well-deserved promotion at Memorial, in his assigned space and gathered the grocery bags from the passenger seat. As he walked toward his building, he nodded to several neighbors, exchanging brief greetings. His role in the rescue efforts during the storm had transformed him from the quiet hospital worker who kept to himself into someone the community recognized and appreciated. He climbed the stairs to his second-floor apartment, but instead of going inside, he continued down the hall and knocked on the door of 2C. It's open. Karen's voice called from within. Marcus pushed the door open to find the apartment filled with afternoon sunlight and the aroma of something delicious baking. In the 6 months since Karen had moved into his building, her new apartment had evolved from a hastily furnished rental into a warm, inviting home. Photos lined the walls, not just the few salvaged from her old place, but new ones. Karen with her daughter Emily on a weekend trip to the mountains. Karen, Marcus, and Bentley at the park. A group shot from the Oak Ridge Community Picnic, where Karen had won the pie baking contest. Perfect timing, Karen said, emerging from the kitchen with flour dusting her apron. Her platinum blonde hair was now streaked with its natural silver, her face more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen it during their early encounters. The lemon squares are just about done. Bentley trotted over to greet Marcus, far more sociable now than the nervous little dog who had cowered in the wreckage of Karen's old apartment. Marcus scratched behind his ears affectionately. I brought ingredients for dinner, Marcus said, holding up the grocery bags. Emily texted that her flight lands at 7, so we should have plenty of time to cook before picking her up. Karen's face lit up at the mention of her daughter. Emily's first visit 6 months ago had blossomed into regular trips, gradually healing the rift between mother and daughter. The reconciliation had been another unexpected gift born from the disaster. She's bringing sketches for her wedding invitations, Karen shared, her voice warm with maternal pride. Can you believe it? My daughter is getting married in October, and she actually wants my opinion on the design. Marcus smiled at her joy. Why wouldn't she? You organized the most successful community fundraiser Oak Ridge has ever seen. Your taste is officially beyond reproach. The fundraiser had been Karen's idea, a way to help the 3 families from Building C who lacked adequate insurance coverage. She had channeled her organizational skills and attention to detail into something constructive rather than punitive, and the results had surprised everyone, including Karen herself. The community made that happen, not just me, she said, characteristically deflecting the praise as she checked her lemon squares. The community that you helped build, Marcus countered, steadying his grocery bags on the counter. Mrs. Chen told me yesterday that her grandson has been accepted to that special science program, thanks to your tutoring. Karen waved off the compliment, but her pleased smile betrayed her satisfaction. Since moving into the building, she had discovered that her years of teaching experience still had value. What had started as helping one struggling student had evolved into regular tutoring sessions for several of the complex's children. Her apartment often buzzed with young voices in the afternoons, a sound she had once would have reported as a noise violation. "Oh, I almost forgot," Karen said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The Reconstruction Committee approved your proposal for the memorial garden where the old oak stood. Construction starts next month." Marcus nodded, pleased. The idea had come to him during one of his and Karen's now regular evening walks with Bentley. The massive oak that had fallen on Building C had been over 100 years old, a silent witness to generations of the city's history. It seemed fitting to commemorate it with a garden that would serve as both a reminder of what was lost and a celebration of renewal. Speaking of the committee, Karen continued, removing the perfectly golden lemon squares from the oven. "They want me to head the new residence council. Can you believe that? Me, who used to be the most hated woman in Oak Ridge." Marcus laughed. "I wouldn't say most hated, maybe most feared." "Ha." Karen set the hot pan on a cooling rack. "That's not much better."